Ow!
Ouch!
Ow! Non-stop hits! WHRW Binghamton!
That hurt!
Hey, George, time to feed you this morning. Here's some moss. Kind of rough today, George. Something hiding under you? Oh, well. Here's some damp water for you, George. Get some worms underneath you.
Binghamton's only real pet rock radio station. WHRW 90.5 FM, Binghamton.
I wish to point out that in the beginning, God created television audiences. That was for practice. Then he created the amoeba.
WHRW Binghamton. We're on the radio. The Bronze Age of Radio, starring Charles Berman as Chris. WHRW Binghamton's only program that broadcasts at 11:30 p.m. on Saturday nights. We now invite you to travel with us back in time, back to radio's Bronze Age, when its most advanced metalworking consisted of techniques for smelting copper and tin from naturally occurring outcroppings of ore, then alloying those metals in order to cast bronze.
You're listening to the Bronze Age of Radio. I'm Chris, played by Charles Berman.
I'm Sammy B., played by Samuel Boyer.
And the station you're listening to is WHRW Binghamton, 90.5 FM in the Southern Tier, your home for college and community radio in the Binghamton area. The Harper Radio Workshop, Harper College Radio, your home for Peace, Love, Mo, and Paul. Now we have on the line with us this afternoon a dial tone. The dial tone is not going to talk to us.
No, not this evening.
And I'll tell you why. Because dial tones only tell you that you're about to make a phone call.
Indeed, that is true. I agree with that.
You can't talk to a dial tone.
That is absolutely correct, sir.
So do you know what we're going to talk to?
Who are we going to talk to?
A live human being. Because we have on the phone with us
Shazam.
Professor Heinrich Oberstein. Now, are you there, Professor Oberstein?
Hey, Oberstein. Can you say Steen?
Steen.
Thank you.
Yes. Professor Oberstein, what exactly are you an expert on that you are coming on the program?
Well, as you very well know, we had discussed this in the past, and I'm an expert on classical architecture. I've taught this for many years, first at the University of Hamburg, and do you happen to know what American sandwich was invented in Hamburg?
So it's not really an American sandwich, then?
Well, do you know? It was the Frankfurter.
Really? Wow.
Yes, it's a very little-known fact. And then I went from Hamburg to the University of Miami, where I was fired, and now I've come to Binghamton.
You were fired from the University of Miami?
Yes, that's true.
What was the reason for that?
Well, some young student called me Oberstein. It should have been Oberstein, and I decked him.
Really? Wow. Well, fortunately, you can't deck us over the radio if we happen to slip or make some kind of error.
Yeah.
Right? Now,
that's pride in your name.
You're an expert on classical architecture. How exactly is classical architecture different from just architecture?
Well, you see, with classical architecture, the buildings come in many, many different sizes.
I see. But
big,
right.
Small, little, tiny, and so forth.
Is there a medium?
Yes, there can be a medium size as well. You see, back in the classical days, classical architecture was looked on very poorly, kind of like the Taco Bell of today. In the classical days, they used to revere the mud hut.
Uh-huh.
But the classical architecture has now come into vogue in its time.
Unlike the mud hut of the past.
Correct. That's correct. You're a smart boy.
Right. Now, in classical architecture, there are many sizes, but in modern architecture, there's only one size for buildings?
I pay no attention. I live in the past.
Oh, okay. So that's the main difference. What would you say are the best colors for classical buildings?
And it's very sad because, Palladio is dead, Michelangelo is dead, and I'm not feeling so good myself.
Wow.
So you're the last one.
I'm probably the last the living expert on this subject. I'm sorry, what would you like to know?
Well, the sizes range from big to very small. What kind of colors do the buildings come in?
This is an excellent question, and classical architecture comes in very, very many colors. Red, green, magenta blue, mango tango, yellow.
I have to interrupt you for a second. There's a mango tango color of classical architecture?
It was very popular in the 1500s.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize they had that then.
Yes, very popular in the 1500s, as was pink canary, brass banana, and of course, everyone knows.
Brass banana?
Brass banana.
That was in the Brass Age. That was most popular.
Correct. It was the predecessor to the Brass Age of radio.
Right. So, you have all these different colors and sizes. Is that really all the work that's involved? You just pick big mango tango and then you have your building?
Yes, but however, it took 4,000 years to invent air conditioning, and that's what they've been working on ever since the Renaissance era.
So that's the main advance in architecture since then?
That's correct, yes, and elevators.
Oh, well, that's true.
What about escalators?
Aha! Very good thought, young man, and something I will include in my future lectures.
So that's not
classical
at all, though?
I overlooked escalators.
How about stairs?
Stairs. Very interesting. Very interesting. And I have noticed stairs in some of the Renaissance buildings. This is a very good... I'm going to add that, too. Excuse me, let me write the stairs.
Oh, go ahead.
Stairs. Yes.
Take thorough notes.
Yeah, that wasn't part of your classical training, was not noticing the stairs?
No, in fact, when I was fired in Miami, they pointed that out to me. I was designing buildings with elevators, escalators. No elevators, no escalators. I just learned about escalators. I was designing buildings with elevators and forgot to put in the stairs.
So there was more than one floor, but no way to get from one to another? That
was the problem. I had to lie a little bit when I got hired at Binghamton because if I had told the real reason, they may not have accepted me. I'm not sure.
So, did any of these buildings with no ways to get between the floors get built?
Numerous ones get built, which was partially ascribed to the fall of the Roman Empire. It was those early buildings that had the elevators but no stairs.
So, it's because the Roman Empire fell, they were building...
Everyone fell. There were no stairs, you fool.
How did they fall down the stairs? They didn't have anything to fall down.
Dumb cuff. The students were much smarter than I am.
Professor Oberstein. Sorry! There's no stairs. Where are they going to fall from?
Well, they climbed to the second floor on the side of the building, and then they couldn't get any higher, and they fell down.
They couldn't get any higher?
I beg your pardon?
They couldn't get any higher? Did you build 3 floors on buildings?
It's hard to climb well, first of all, they must have used ladders to build a building, but they forgot to put stairs inside. What do I know?
Well, how can you blame them for forgetting it if you never put it in the plans?
I don't blame them for the fall of the Roman Empire. It was much before my time.
Of course.
Blame them.
So, don't any of your students ever notice that there's no stairs in the buildings or complain about that?
Well, you see, that's why I was originally an architect, but when we noticed this big failure in my buildings, of course, that's when I went into teaching.
I see. So now only the new architects will make this error.
Well, correct. I mean, the good good ones will put stairs in, and the idiots will teach.
Oh, so is that an admission on your part?
Well, it's good money.
Oh, of course, of course.
Of course.
Now, have there been any complaints about you since you've been teaching at Binghamton?
Well, I would not say complaints. No, I would not say there are any complaints. I've been here 4 or 5 years, and I have not really what you would say taught a course.
But they're paying you.
Please don't broadcast that on the radio, because yes, they have been paying me, but the New York State budget is a very large bureaucracy, and no one has quite noticed that yet.
I see. So what exactly does I'm sure that the administrators won't be able to fire you based on a radio broadcast, but what exactly does your job entail then?
Well, I am a spokesperson for the classical architecture movement in western New York State. No one else has yet joined the movement, but when they do, I'm probably in paramount position to be an advocate for classical architecture in the state.
So it's a whole movement then. It's not just...
It will be eventually. We are hoping, in fact, that this broadcast will that some of your listeners will want to join the movement.
When you refer to we, who are you particularly speaking of?
In myself.
So you're the only one in the movement at the moment?
At this time, but vast potential. Remember, we're limiting this to Central New York and Western New York.
So try to convince people then, why is classical architecture with no stairs and no air conditioning and mango tango better than modern architecture?
Well, first of all, Palladio, if you consider, he was the Donald Trump of his time. They had some of the greatest casinos in Padua.
Really? Was gambling legal in the Roman Empire?
Oh, absolutely legal. You could go play roulette, and you could bet 2 slaves, 4 slaves, whatever you want. You could win, you could lose, whatever.
I see. So you could gamble on slaves in the Roman Empire.
Yes. You gamble instead of chips. It was hard to fit them onto the wheel, to put the slaves down. But yes, that's how it worked in those days.
Have you discovered roulette wheels that are big enough to fit slaves on them?
Well, it's not exactly a discovery. It's just, passed down from generation to generation that we know it happened.
So it's more of a traditional knowledge.
That's correct. And certainly we could return to those wonderful days if we embraced the classical architecture today.
I would prefer we don't return to those days of marketing slaves in the casino. Just a thing I'm gonna throw out there.
Well, that's a very radical idea to have, young man.
I know. I'm just crazy like that.
Basically, the question is, are you saying that if we go back to classical architecture, we'll also go back to slavery?
Well, no, I would not take it that far. It's just that you asked me about the good times, where the good times rolled back in the Renaissance, and today this is a very difficult era, and why not live it up again a little bit.
So, but there is gambling though, just not with people in the casinos.
Well, I suppose I will grant you this much. You still do have gambling today. It's not the same as it was then. It's all very relative, and this is relative to that, and that's relative to this, and that's what I call the theory of relativity.
Oh, so you invented that too?
Yes, a long, long time ago.
Oh, okay. So, Professor Oberstein, does that mean that
you have to consider, how do we know really what's behind the beyond? Most of us don't even know what's beyond the behind.
You're a philosopher too.
Yes, and a podiatrist.
Oh, So you really have a lot of different professions then you can go into.
Yes,
Jack
that's
of all
true.
trades, huh?
Yeah, but you're just working sort of on a salary to promote classical architecture and the return to slavery.
No, I don't. That's not. I
okay.
really don't want to.
Okay. Oh, so when classical architecture comes back, will you help build some of these buildings with your plans?
Well, no, I had a very difficult time, as an architect, and things work out much, much better as a teacher. And I know I speak for the entire faculty at Binghamton that it's much better to teach than to do. So I would remain a teacher.
Did you actually have to teach classes in Florida or not?
Well, that was another one of the problems. They were expecting me to teach, but I was a very new professor, and I talked for about 45 minutes, and then I ran out of things to say.
After 45 minutes?
That's correct.
So, really, there's not much to know about.
So I was waiting for the next semester, and in the interim, unfortunately, got fired.
Oh, so
you were only there for a semester.
And then I had to take a step down, so I came to Binghamton.
No, so they never actually complained about the fact that you'd stopped teaching anything. It was really just that you.
Well, they complained I never started.
Oh, okay. But so there's really only 45 minutes worth of knowledge on classical architecture then.
Well, because there's very little yet written about. You had very little left from the old days.
Oh, that's true.
From the good old days.
Right, when there was no air conditioning.
Classical architecture, is very classy. That's why they call it classical.
Well, yeah.
Upscale, understandable.
Yeah, very, very classy.
Yeah. So that stuff would be like the Parthenon, right?
Parthenon. I've never heard of such a thing.
Oh, I'm thinking of different kind of classical architecture, I guess.
That's crazy classical you're thinking of.
It's crazy, Parthenon.
What's your favorite classical building, then, of what is left?
Of what's left, let me think. A favorite classical, I like very much Burger King's, and somewhat a little bit Wendy's.
You mentioned Taco Bell before, too. Is there a chance that maybe you're confusing classical architecture with fast food?
Well, after all, in its time, it was where people got together to eat and have supper, so there's a great similarity.
Well, yes, but the Burger King is new. It's only in the past few...
Yeah, it's like the 40s.
Yeah, because we have rediscovered the classical architecture with our restaurants.
Wait, I must ask, are you saying that there were fast food restaurants in the Roman Empire?
Of course, young man. Of course, there were many Romans to feed and many slaves to feed, and you couldn't do that at one at a time. You had to make big meals together. Everyone would come in, the children would have a happy meal, and it was a wonderful time.
Well, would you have to pay for your slaves to eat there?
Yes, naturally.
Okay.
You could win prizes too.
Well,
okay.
if you're gambling them at a casino, how do you pay for the slaves? Do you hand them a slave to feed your other slaves?
Well, you might have lost all your slaves, or you may have extras. If you had extra slaves, it was very expensive. You had to feed all of them.
Wow.
Yeah, so you might not want to win too many slaves, or else that could cost you money too.
It could be a big problem, of course.
So it's tough to be wealthy and it's tough to be poor, apparently.
Well, the same today, yes.
True.
So, any other thoughts you would like to know? I mean, I've used much of my 45 minutes of my lecture.
Wow. Oh, so your lecture is actually almost over.
Well, I would show pictures of all the fast food restaurants. That was something else that they didn't particularly care for in Miami.
So, do you have a preference within these fast food ancient architectural wonders?
I suppose my best would be Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips.
Really?
Yes.
So that's not even originated in America. That's a British food.
Precisely. Right. Precisely. beautiful juxtaposition, you know.
Those crazy Brits.
Yeah. So, Burger King, Wendy's, Taco Bell, Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips. And we've only got about 9 minutes left in this section of the show. But if you could explain exactly how it is that the ancient people had these fast food, and why is the architecture interesting if all the buildings, every Burger King looks the same?
Oh, young man, of course they don't all look the same. They're very, very subtle differences. You know, in some of them you get a Whopper, in some you get a double Whopper. It's all, you know, you have to, everyone has just a little bit of a creative genius about it. No, they're not nearly the same.
I'm curious, don't they usually have the same menu at all of these restaurants? I mean, nowadays we have the same menus at all these restaurants. If you order a double Whopper at one store, you'll get it at the other store. Don't you think they had the same type of thing going on at ancient Rome with the architecture design?
Absolutely. You know, you get, crushed blue corn in one restaurant, you get the same in another. It's the same difference. It's not different.
So then what would be the definitive differences between these buildings then, if their buildings are built the same and their food is the same and they feed multiple people?
Well, because it's this style. Look at the Golden Arches. The Golden Arches. This is as classical as you could be. You know, it's just, what else in modern architecture has golden arches? And so you can see the Roman influence right there.
Yeah, but what about the picture of Wendy? Is she a Roman influence?
Well, Wendy in those days was a hooker.
Oh, really?
But that had to be somewhat whitewashed, you know, today. So we cannot keep the entire tradition of the Roman period.
That's a shock. I mean, have you published this?
It is very shocking, and that also got me in trouble in Miami.
Wendy? You weren't doing anything with Wendy, right?
Oh, no.
Is she still alive?
She's not alive anymore.
Okay.
Oh, all right.
She lived to be 106, but she's not.
Oh, okay.
Wow, that's very specific facts on Wendy.
Well, this is an incredible discovery. I mean, how could they have thought that you weren't doing any original work?
I now have a new respect for Wendy.
Absolutely. After all, one has to consider how they found, where did they get the money to found the company?
Well, that's true. So I guess in those days, the money you could make from one hooker would be enough to found a whole fast food chain.
Well, no, you one at a time. She had to turn tricks across the United States. It was very...
Well, why aren't there other ones like Susie's or something?
Or Gina's.
Yeah.
Well, Wendy was the first.
Oh. I thought this was the oldest profession. Why? How did when?
Of course, that is the connection. That is the connection to the original Wendy's in Rome and the one we see today.
So by fast food you mean hookers?
No, I'd say that, you see all the derivations from the old days in the arches, in Wendy, the hooker, and it all goes back to the Roman days. It's the most exact, it's as close to what it was like then as any other buildings today.
No.
You wouldn't think a Trump Tower with just a big boxy box compares to classical architecture.
Well, Wendy's is usually sort of... But also, a question with Wendy's. Why do you need stairs in Wendy's if there's only one floor?
Another replica, you see, because I forgot stairs. You see no stairs in Wendy's. You see no stairs in Burger King. Precisely another reason it resembles the architecture of the Renaissance period.
So you're saying that it was exactly Wendy's then, because we know it was the same hooker that's on the sign and the golden arches for McDonald's.
It's a derivation, not exactly the same.
Oh, okay. What
she wore a kind of somewhat of an abbreviated toga.
Oh, okay. What about Burger King? Where was the burger from?
Isn't it the king now? The guy with the big face and the...
Oh, yes.
Well, I think I explained the burger was invented in Frankfurt.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. You said the Frankfurt was invented in Hamburg.
It was out as well. That's true as well.
Somebody must have confused the names somewhere along there.
I don't know. It's very possible 5,000 years the name could become confused.
Very.
Well, isn't that your job to look it up and say, well, anyway, among these classical works like Burger King and Wendy's, have you been working to teach students how to create more fast food restaurants all around the world?
Well, this is a good idea. I've been looking for something since I got to Binghamton to teach, and that's a very good idea. In fact, I'll bring that up to the administration.
Because I know that I mentioned before this building, the Parthenon. If you go to Athens, there's the Parthenon. The Pantheon is in Rome. If you go to the McDonald's in Rome, the Pantheon is right across the street from it.
Yes, another connection.
So I was just going to tell people, if they wanted to see the McDonald's in Rome, to see what classical Roman architecture looks like, that would be how they could find it. Just look for this place called the Pantheon and go across the street, and that's where the McDonald's is.
Exactly. It's a great connection there. It's another proves my point, because the Parthenon was getting old, so
right.
They built a McDonald's with the big golden arch.
Do you think that's an improvement?
Of course, young man. Sometimes I'm so nostalgic for the students in Miami.
Were they smarter than here?
So much smarter. So much smarter.
How do you do this? How do you know? Like, just by observation, your classes, you can tell that stuff, or?
Of course, because first they were smart because no one showed up for the classes, and that is very smart. Especially my classes.
Right. Well, here, if you haven't had any classes, they must all be very smart because they haven't shown up to any of them, right?
Exactly. Well, you make a good point. I retract my comment about business.
Oh, okay. But I mean, the dumb ones that did actually show up, have they now accepted the gospel of ancient fast food? And
well, many of my students have gone on to own franchises all over rural America.
That's wonderful. You're doing service to Professor Oberstein. Is there anything? We're just about out of time for this segment, but is there anything else you'd like to get across the audience?
Yes, I'd like everyone to remember that the best thing is not to be born, but how many people are that lucky? Only one in hundreds and hundreds of people.
That's a wonderful thought for our audience to take home.
Thank you. Please, live by that thought, and you'll be a happy life.
Thank you. That was a great thought. That was a great thought to leave us on.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure.
Of course. Thank you for coming on the show.
You're quite welcome.
Good night, Professor Oberstein.
Good night. Thank you.
This was an interview with the Binghamton Professor of Classical Architecture,
Professor Oberstein.
Heinrich Oberstein, who's an expert on classical architecture and fast food, apparently.
I have learned a lot about classical architecture at this point in my life.
You're listening to WHRW in Binghamton, New York. This is the Bronze Age of Radio with me, Chris, played by Richard Berman, and
Sammy B.
People in this valley and throughout New York State lead fuller, freer,